When I came to Sompo, I already had managerial experience. I was an experienced professional. But in many cases, that experience did not matter because when you switch from an industrial American conglomerate into a Japanese insurance company that wants to transform itself, it's very different. So many of the things that you're used to or that you assume that you know best are not really effective.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Turing, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and in media partnership with CTech. Working with Israel and Japan. Meet Yinnon Dolev, CEO of Sompo Digital Lab Israel, Sompo Holdings. Yinnon is the CEO of Sompo's Digital Lab in Tel Aviv. Sompo is Japan's largest insurance company, which also operates a chain of nursing homes for the elderly. His group is responsible for partnering and investing in startups in areas such as Insurtech, digital health, smart mobility, and Agritech. Prior to that, Yinnon spent 13 years at General Electric in various management positions. He established GE's company's startup partnership program, which included 26 startups. Yinnon holds a BA in computer science from the Interdisciplinary Center in Israel and an MBA from Cornell University.
Yinnon Dolev, good morning. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
Hey, how are you, Michael?
You're not calling from Japan, although you're working with Japan, right?
That's right. I'm actually calling from Tel Aviv. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, I haven't been to Japan in over a year and a half.
Wow. And so, Yinnon, there's a few things that I want to get through in these 20 minutes, both about your personal journey and, the unexpected nature of your specific journey, but also talking a little bit about the Japanese market and how, as an Israeli, you're now working with a conservative enterprise from Japan in insurance and opening up the digital lab here in Israel, but also you have vast experience with General Electric and an MBA from Cornell. And so tell me a little bit first about your journey, about how you look at yourself over these years, proceeding through the different opportunities. How much of it was planned? How much was unexpected? And what sort of guided you throughout your journey?
Sure. Well, most of the good things that happened to me in my career, I never planned for. They actually occurred. Starting with my first position as a software engineer in a startup company, which, like many people, I was invited to join by my commander in the Milim, in the reserve duty. Who was the head of R&D. A few years later, I decided to get an MBA at Cornell University. That's always been my dream, to have a business degree from an American university. And I thought after I actually go back to high tech, into Silicon Valley or something of that nature. But then came General Electric and said, "Hey, your profile is interesting. We have this leadership program we think you could be a good fit for." And at that time, GE was a big, successful brand. So I said, why not? I'll try it. And that attempt has taken place for 13 years. It was a great experience because I managed to do a lot of things in energy, healthcare, technology licensing. GE moved me back to Israel to lead its startups and a partnership program. From 2015 to 2018, there was the boom of the IoT industrial space. So I was one of the founders of the local program here. And then came a Japanese insurance company that wanted to transform itself digitally and change its business models by establishing a local innovation team. And invited me to establish the Sompo Digital Lab Tel Aviv, and I've been doing this for the past 3 years.
So it does. I'm guessing it doesn't just happen overnight or by complete coincidence. I have to understand, how does it actually happen that you're working for General Electric in Israel, a part of the Israel ecosystem, and all of a sudden you find yourself getting approached by a Japanese firm saying, "Hey, we've I don't know what, but we're interested to work together. Why don't you come and join us?" And I'm guessing it's not the most trivial mindset shift from General Electric to Sompo.
That's right. It's very, very different. both cultures as well as methods of operation. At that time when I was head of the startup program at GE, I worked a lot with venture capital firms and other partners. And Sompo was looking to establish a team here, reached out to the local ecosystem, to the same venture capital firms I was familiar with. And they received a recommendation about myself, and the connection was made. There was a good chemistry, and very shortly after, a few weeks later, I joined Sompo. I always had interest in Japan. I never had any experience working with or in Japan. But I always, as a small child, I read books about Japan, and always had interest in the history of Japan and the country itself, but never had the experience. So to me, it was kind of a risk, but something that I was very intrigued by. To really try to morph this kind of a traditional financial company into becoming more digital and advanced, but also working with Japanese and getting to know the culture and the country better. And so, it's been a journey. It's been very interesting. I'm studying Japanese. I have much more experience now. I have friends in Japan. I feel like I'm still learning a lot. I'm no expert by all means. It's fun. It's been fun.
If you look back at the transition and some of the things that you had to overcome or change or understand better, if you could talk to Yinnon when he was just starting out with Sompo, what would you tell him? So what are some things that you learned now that you've been there for quite some time that previously you just weren't able to know because you didn't experience this transition yet?
Right. When I came to Sompo, I already had managerial experience. I was an experienced professional. But in many cases, that experience did not matter, because when you switch from an industrial American conglomerate into a Japanese insurance company that wants to transform itself, it's very different. So many of the things that you're used to or that you assume that you know best are not really effective. Just to give you an example, in
Please,
Japan,
yes.
there's a lot of hierarchies, right? Even in the workplace, not only amongst superiors and subordinates, but also amongst peers. There's all kinds of hierarchies. And in many cases, it just works. So assuming that we Israelis or Westerners know how to work best in an agile environment and we can do things differently is a little bit arrogant. So one of the things I had to do very early on is to check the ego aside, check it out, and understand that there's different ways and means when working in Japan or with a Japanese company. First learn them, understand them, and before trying to change them.
Right. And so what does that actually entail, this understanding? Because it's not just, embracing yourself in the culture and saying, okay, let's just give it time and understand. Do you actually have to take proactive steps to try and understand them and to really embrace them? Or is it mainly just, just spending time, being calm and letting the energy, feeling the energy as you go along?
I think it's really coming with a mindset that there are certain things that you can learn how to do better from them, but also realizing that there's ways and means that we bring from the Western world that we can help them improve. And so I'll give you an example of one thing that I've learned a lot from my Japanese peers, and it's all about active listening and reflecting.
Right.
For example, in Japan, interrupting someone or having a passionate discussion where people yell, it's very impolite. I've witnessed a colleague of mine, a senior executive, manage negotiations with me with an Israeli startup. And it was very quiet. He tended to more listen and accept information rather than share his own mind and try to impose the position of the other side, and then quietly make a decision. And that was remarkable. So for me, this is a great way of how to achieve effectiveness and also, become a little bit more, humble and less kind of aggressive, but still be effective in our work.
Right, and I think what I'm hearing here is one of the challenges is that you're not just having to make a mindset shift yourself and to embrace the culture, which a lot of this embracement is not necessarily to change, but also to respect and to acknowledge, how one wants to be treated or talked to. But also, it sounds like another challenge is as you're working on partnerships between the Israeli ecosystem and Sompo, you actually have to be sort of this messenger and help the Israeli companies and Israeli folks understand what they're entering. This is not just another Zoom call with the regular counterparts in the US, right?
That's right. That's very much the case. When you work on a big project between an Israeli technology company and one of our business units in Japan, in many cases, I find myself, me or my team, as mediators, as or coaches. We have to explain to the Israeli startup how do the Japanese make decisions and what would be best as far as to how to approach them. And by the way, vice versa as well. Unfortunately, I can tell that the Japanese people have no expectation of you behaving like them, and they fully understand that they're different, and they're very humble about this. And so, and they also understand the intricacies of Israeli culture, like the fact that we're very direct, that
Interesting.
we're very casual. In many cases, they're actually trying to learn and embrace some of those habits themselves. But every time I
Wow.
do a deal, or it's not only about the technology or the business opportunity. It also has a lot of a kind of a cultural, anthropological aspect to it. And you're right; it has a lot to do with kind of coaching both sides on the how the other side thinks. And
Right. So
it's fascinating.
tell me a little bit about the Japanese ecosystem. I don't know anything about that ecosystem. How does it work? And, I'm imagining that quite a few people that are listening to this also aren't really, knowledgeable of what's happening on that side of the world.
Sure. So, it's the third largest economy in the world, and it's growing in many cases. There are some social issues that have to be resolved, in many cases by technology, like, for example, an aging society. A third of the population is elderly
Wow.
people.
A
Other
third.
elements in Japan are, for example, yeah, that's right. And so there's a lot of issues related to that, from healthcare all the way to managing independence or driving, transportation, mobility. Uh, Cities in Japan are becoming smarter and embracing technology. It's driven by the government. There are some government subsidies and policies. So I think that in the next few years, we're going to see more of the smart cities market in Japan booming. Telemedicine and digital health is going strong. And what's interesting here is that unlike the US, where you have local innovation like the Bay Area or in Boston or other hubs, in Japan, it's much less so. And so the country is actually embracing external innovation and partnerships from outside. In fact, even a government office that puts branches and offices in places like Tel Aviv and others, calling entrepreneurs to establish their business in Japan.
Hmm.
To establish a local entity, it takes a day. It's a very business friendly country. People usually are very honest and very strict on fulfilling the business terms, like paying on time. And they're very intrigued by the innovation that happens in Israel. Uh, One thing is important to know: the standard of service in Japan is very high. Uh, Starting from just a restaurant on the street all the way to large multinationals. And so, if you're an entrepreneur or investor and you want to enter the Japanese market, you have to think about the way you provide service and support, at least as good as your product. It's not a side
Right.
effect. You have to,
Interesting.
if you're going to be successful in providing service in Japan, you're going to be successful elsewhere in the world. That's why I think it's one of the reasons why Japan is so lucrative. So those are some of the characteristics of the Japanese ecosystem. And I'm glad to say that more and more investors and corporations from Japan are putting a footprint in Israel, and more entrepreneurs from Israel are looking at Japan as a viable market.
Did you ever think you're going to be working with Japan? At this point in your career, after Cornell, after General Electric, was this a part of any idea, any motivation?
Had you asked me like 5 years ago if I would work for a Japanese insurance company, I would have thought you were crazy. No chance. But as I mentioned, many of the good things that happened to me in my career are things that came my way that I wasn't planning for,
Right.
and I'm glad they did. So this has been quite a fun journey, and I've made a lot of friendships along the way.
And so obviously there are vast opportunities as we become more globalized and the Israeli market becomes more and more relevant in every possible space in the world. And there's going to be a lot of interesting partnership potentials between countries. Is young entrepreneurs. It seems sometimes that we're in our own bubble and we're in our own ecosystem, and it's hard to see the outside world. What do we do to see these opportunities, to be a part of them, especially as these opportunities are going to become more and more meaningful as time goes on?
From my personal perspective, you come to people like me. So my team, my group, is very proactive in reaching out to the local ecosystem in order to evangelize what we're selling. And so if you're interested in learning what are the main challenges or how to operate in Japan or elsewhere, by the way, because our company is global, then this is what we do for a living. And so with some research and reaching out to people like us, to other Japanese corporations, to Japanese investors, you can pretty much get a good understanding of the type of problems you can solve. What does it take to do business in Japan? How is it different than elsewhere in the world? And I can tell you that I'll give you a nice little anecdote. Many of the companies, if not the majority of the companies that we work with now, are companies who are focused on the U.S. market, who initially told us no. We said, no, we have to be focused. We're only focused on the U.S. market. And then we found a viable business opportunity that they couldn't say no to. And they understood that the market in Japan is something that's a lucrative environment that through partnerships with companies like us or others doesn't necessarily have to consume too many resources, but still we can penetrate that market. So together, that's my offering as to how to best learn and immerse yourself in the ecosystem in Japan.
I love it, and obviously, the painting behind you. I think it looks like it's a canvas from Japan, or at least somewhere in Asia, right?
You're right. If you come to our office to Tel Aviv, and I invite you, Michael, to come and visit us, we try to give it kind of a Japanese Israeli flavor. We have both green tea and espresso, so it's kind of a hybrid environment that we try to create for ourselves.
Amazing, Yinnon. I love that, getting a very small but meaningful introduction for me into what you're doing, and I think what you're describing here is part of your journey is going to be a part of many people's journeys as time goes on, and as the Israeli ecosystem opens up in a meaningful ways. I think in the past few years, especially, we're seeing companies emerge out of Israel that are not just dealing with the traditional SaaS or cyber companies that we're used to, but actually dealing with issues that are relevant around the world, exploring new markets. And so this internationalization and this acceptance and embracement of different cultures and markets, I think, is going to be even more meaningful. And so I have a feeling that I'm going to be picking your brain for quite some time now, also on a personal level. And so I appreciate definitely your time, and I'm definitely going to come visit the offices. I have 3 short questions left. And the first one is, your favorite subject in school?
My favorite subject in school was music because I'm a big music fan. I play a little music, and
Electric
it
guitar.
was always kind of a. That's right. Yeah. And so, actually, yes, that's right. I played and I sang a little bit, although I'm not a good singer. But it was always a nice getaway from the daily, school classes.
And who would be one of your role models or somebody that inspires you in some way?
So speaking of music, I would say Brian May, the guitar player for Queen. It's not only because he's talented in playing the guitar; he's also an outside-the-box thinker. He designs his own guitar. He plays
Wow.
a 5 cent pick instead of just a standard pick, and he has also a PhD in astrophysics.
Wow.
Really a good example of how building domain expertise, talent, smarts, and outside-the-box thinking.
I haven't heard that one yet, and I love it. And the last question is 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Good listener, a people's person, and sense of humor.
I love it. Yinnon, toda rabba. Thank you very, very much. And I'll see you in the Tel Aviv
It's been a
offices.
pleasure.
Thank you very, very much. Take care. Bye bye.